Coming up on Arirang News. The United Nations Security Council will on Friday hold an open meeting over North Korea's purported space launch vehicle earlier this week. The meeting is called by the U.S. and South Korea will also take part, although it's not a permanent member. South Korea's inflation cools for a fourth consecutive month in May, gaining 3.3% from a year earlier. This is the weakest growth since October 2021. The United States and Taiwan sign a new comprehensive trade deal that strengthens economic ties between the two countries and opens Taiwan to more U.S. exports. This comes amid rising tensions with China as it claims Taiwan as a part of its territory. Good evening. It's 9 p.m. here in Seoul. Thank you for joining us on Arirang News. The United Nations Security Council is convening an open meeting on Friday over North Korea's recent spy satellite launch attempt. Although not a permanent member, South Korea will be joining the meeting along with others. Our political correspondent Lee Si-hoo leads us off.
The United Nations Security Council is holding a meeting to discuss potential response measures to North Korea's attempted reconnaissance satellite launch earlier this week. The open meeting will be held on Friday afternoon local time at the UN headquarters in New York. South Korea will take part, although not a permanent member of the UNSC. This comes after North Korea on Wednesday fired a projectile carrying a satellite, but the attempt failed with the rocket crashing into the sea. The U.S. has condemned the launch, saying it was a violation of UN Security Council resolutions banning any activity using ballistic missile technology. President Joe Biden on Thursday said that the U.S., South Korea, and Japan are deepening cooperation to deter threats in the Indo-Pacific region, including from North Korea. Delivering a commencement speech at the U.S. Air Force Academy in Colorado, Biden added that as for China, Washington does not seek conflict or confrontation with Beijing. While saying the two sides should work together to solve some global challenges, Biden said the U.S. is prepared for competition and will stand up for its interests and values. Meanwhile, U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin called North Korea dangerous and destabilizing and said the U.S. is, with its two Asian allies, committed to safeguarding peace in the region, particularly against North Korean threats. This came during a joint press conference after a meeting with his Japanese counterpart Yasukazu Hamada in Tokyo on Thursday.
We stand with our Japanese and ROK allies in the face of North Korea's continued provocations. And the United States will take all necessary measures to ensure the security of our homeland and the defense of our allies.
The Japanese defense chief also emphasized the importance of trilateral relations to better respond to North Korean threats, including any other attempt by Pyongyang to launch a satellite. Lee Si-hoo, Arirang News.
Work continues by the South Korean military to retrieve more of North Korea's space launch vehicle dubbed the Cheolima-1 rocket, which fell into the West Sea. Seoul's Joint Chiefs of Staff says that on Friday it deployed the 3,200-ton Cheonghaejin submarine rescue ship to help bring up what's deemed to be the propellant part of the rocket. Divers will go into the water and tie ropes to parts of the wreckage. The military says the lifting of the rocket could take longer than the initial goal of Saturday. The debris found on Wednesday is deemed to be the second stage of the propulsion, with a length of 15 meters and a diameter up to 3 meters, and has dropped to the seabed at a depth of around 75 meters. Military experts believe that the rocket could be a comprehensive package that reflects the regime's most up-to-date technologies related to its ICBM development. And South Korea has slapped sanctions on a notorious North Korean hacking group believed to have assisted in Pyongyang's latest rocket attempt. Our foreign affairs correspondent Bae Eun-ji reports.
2 days after the Pyongyang's failed spy satellite launch attempt, South Korea has imposed new sanctions on a North Korean hacking group. Announced Friday, the fresh sanctions have been imposed against a group called Kimsuky, which Seoul's foreign ministry says is a unit within the North's military intelligence agency. The hacking group is accused of collecting intelligence from individuals and institutions in the fields of diplomacy, security, and national defense, before handing it to the North Korean government for the past 10 years. It's also known to acquire technologies related to weapons development, satellites, and space technology globally, while also directly or indirectly contributing to Pyongyang's satellite development project.
Today's measure shows the South Korean government's commitment to firmly respond to North Korea that's been threatening to conduct another provocation after launching a long-range ballistic missile on May 31st.
Seoul's foreign ministry explained that the sanctions are the first to be unilaterally imposed on Kimsuky, and the eighth against the North since President Yoon took office in May last year. To warn the international community, Seoul on Friday also issued a joint security advisory with Washington, recommending precautions against suspicious activities. It provided detailed information about the hacking techniques used, including its way of stealing information using spear phishing, which mainly uses emails and websites. The joint advisory was released together with South Korea's foreign ministry, its National Intelligence Service, the Korean National Police Agency, along with the U.S. FBI, the U.S. State Department, and the NSA. 배은지, Arirang News.
Defense chiefs of around the world gather for Shangri-La Dialogue Security Summit in Singapore. Defense ministers from South Korea and neighboring Japan are scheduled to sit down on the sidelines for the first time in years. And eyes are on the trilateral defense talks with Washington that's likely to focus on an information sharing plan on North Korean missile warnings. Our defense correspondent Kim Hyun-sung has a preview.
This year, defense ministers from roughly 40 countries will gather at Singapore's Shangri-La Hotel to hold major defense talks. Here are some of the most anticipated discussions. With Seoul and Tokyo patching up relations lately, so are the defense lines. South Korea's defense minister and his Japanese counterpart are poised to hold talks for the first time in 4 years, marking a potential thaw in frosty diplomatic relations. The two have been held in an icy deadlock since the 2018 Japanese patrol plane incident. Tokyo accused the South Korean Navy of violating naval code by allegedly locking its radar onto the plane flying at a low altitude. South Korea denied these claims and instead condemned the Japanese patrol plane for its provocative H-shaped flight pattern at the time. After failing to find common ground about this issue for years, the upcoming face-to-face between the Seoul-Tokyo ministers hold the potential to finally bring about a settlement on this diplomatic dispute. Another key point is dialogue on North Korea. With Pyongyang's provocations growing increasingly bolder, the regime is expected to be the ongoing talking point. In three-way talks between Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo, these countries may discuss ways to bolster their defenses against any potential attacks. A collaborative real-time missile alert system may likely top the agenda. As for the wider region, China will most likely be grabbing the headlines. In a rare occurrence, China's defense minister Li Shangfu turned down his American counterpart Lloyd Austin's calls for a one-on-one meeting. Tensions have escalated, especially with the two countries in gridlock over the issue of Taiwan. It remains to be seen what China's stance will be and whether it will propose a new defense strategy. Kim Hyun-sung, Arirang News.
The leaders of South Korea and East Timor agreed to cooperate against North Korea's provocations, condemning the most recent as an illegal action. According to the presidential office on Friday, President Yoon met with East Timor President Jose Ramos Horta in Seoul for talks. President Ramos Horta said he'll take part in the international community's firm and united response to North Korea. At the meeting, the two leaders also agreed to bolster cooperation in various fields, including development, labor, and education. President Yoon requested support for Korea International Cooperation Agency volunteers in East Timor. And Korea's economy expanded in the first quarter by a small margin to ward off a recession. But pundits point out the local economy continues to face an uphill battle. Moon Hae-ryun explains.
South Korea's economy narrowly avoided going into recession as it recorded growth in the first quarter of this year. According to data released by the Bank of Korea on Friday, the country's gross domestic product showed growth of 0.3% on quarter between January and March, the same as the advanced estimate given at the end of April. The country showed economic growth for 9 consecutive months from 2021, but with a downturn in exports, recorded a contraction of 0.3% in the fourth quarter of last year. On year, however, the first quarter of this year only saw a 0.9% growth.
Growth on year in the 0% range is low, and we have entered a period of slow growth with the annual rate itself falling, unlike high growth rates in the past.
With the latest data, the agency attributed the turnaround to a rise in private spending on the back of eased COVID-19 restrictions. Spending on dining and accommodation, as well as recreational activities, saw 0.6% growth this quarter compared to the previous quarter. Government consumption also expanded by 0.4% on the back of increased spending on social security benefits, despite a decrease in expenditure on goods. And despite sluggish semiconductor exports, exports overall grew by 4.5% as auto exports saw significant growth, an increase of 0.7 percentage points compared to the growth recorded last quarter. However, facility investment fell by 5% due to a decline in machinery investment. Meanwhile, the country's gross national income, the total amount of money earned by people and businesses, rose by 1.9% on quarter. The Bank of Korea also released their overview for national accounts in 2022, showing that GDP increased by 2.6%, the slowest pace since the pandemic broke out in 2020. The central bank also lowered this year's economic growth outlook to 1.4%, with an extended slowdown for exports looking likely amid an ongoing global economic slump. 문혜련, Arirang News.
Price pressures on consumers are easing further here in the country. In fact, inflation grew by the smallest in 19 months in May. Lee Soo-jin has more.
Inflation in South Korea continues to ease, falling to the lower 3% range in May. Data from Statistics Korea released on Friday shows that the Consumer Price Index, a key gauge of inflation, rose 3.3% on year. That's the lowest figure since October 2021. Inflation has been on a steady decline for 4 straight months after rising slightly in January. This slowing of inflation is largely due to the on-year drop in oil prices, mostly due to base effect from the sharp rise in prices during the first half of last year. Prices of petroleum products also plunged 18% compared to the previous year. That's the sharpest on-year drop in 3 years. Prices of agricultural, fisheries, and livestock products also dropped 0.3% on year. Core inflation, which excludes volatile food and energy price changes, also slowed to 3.9% last month compared to the 4% recorded in April. The agency is forecasting that prices will continue to stabilize.
There are uncertainties regarding international commodity prices, oil prices, the global situation, and exchange rates. But if there are no special circumstances, prices are likely to remain stable for the time being.
However, electricity, gas, and water prices surged more than 23%, marking the second consecutive month that the utility fee increases have been in the 20% range. And the cost of dining out has rose nearly 7% on year. Also on Friday, the Bank of Korea held a meeting regarding consumer price growth. An official projected that inflation growth is likely to continue to slow until the middle of the year, falling to the 2% range before rising back to the 3% range towards the end of the year. Lee Soo-jin, Arirang News.
In the auto industry, the combined sales of Hyundai Motor and Kia in the U.S. this May rose on year for the 10th consecutive month. The Hyundai Motor Group, which includes Kia, announced on Friday that 147,000 units were sold last month, up 21% on year. Hyundai sales saw an 18.4% rise on year, while Kia was up 23.4%. The sales increase was largely driven by eco-friendly cars such as electric vehicles, which despite the U.S. Inflation Reduction Act, reached an all-time high in monthly sales. Sales of eco-friendly cars accounted for 17.8% last month, also a record high figure. The U.S. Senate has approved a deal on the debt ceiling and budget cuts, ending a weeks-long political standoff and fending off a default in the world's largest economy. Jung Eun-ju tells us more.
The U.S. Senate on Thursday passed bipartisan legislation backed by President Joe Biden that lifts the government's $31.4 trillion debt ceiling, averting what would have been a first-ever default. The bill now heads to President Joe Biden, who forged the deal with House Speaker Kevin McCarthy and plans to sign it just 4 days before the U.S. Treasury projected it would run out of cash to pay all its bills. Lawmakers in the upper chamber passed the bill with overwhelming bipartisan support on Thursday evening, with 63 senators backing the legislation and 36 opposed. The House of Representatives had approved the deal on Wednesday night. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer hailed Democrats' role in the debt ceiling agreement after the Senate passed the bill.
We may be a little tired, but we did it. So we're very, very happy. Default was the giant sword hanging over America's head. But because of the good work of President Biden, as well as Democrats in the House and Democrats in the Senate, we are not defaulting.
Just moments after the Senate passed the debt limit bill, President Biden praised Congress for its efforts and said in a statement, "I look forward to signing this bill into law as soon as possible." The Treasury Department had warned it would be unable to pay all its bills on June 5th if Congress failed to act by then. Such a scenario would have dealt a traumatic hit to the global economy and financial markets. The deal was a product of tense talks between President Biden and Republican House Speaker McCarthy. With this agreement, the statutory limit on federal borrowing will be suspended until January 1st, 2025. Unlike most other developed countries, the United States limits the amount of debt the government can borrow regardless of any spending allocated by the legislature. Jung Eun-ju, Arirang News.
Amid increasingly strained relations with China, the U.S. and Taiwan signed a new trade deal. It's the largest trade deal agreement in over 40 years since the diplomatic relations were severed. China strongly opposes it, arguing that it violates the One China principle. Shin-Young reports.
The United States and Taiwan have signed a new trade deal. According to Taiwan Central News Agency, the agreement is the first under the framework made last year called the U.S.-Taiwan Initiative on 21st Century Trade. It comes against the backdrop of increasingly strained relations between Washington and Beijing. The deal does not address tariff reduction or elimination, which are typically the main focuses of a free trade agreement. Instead, it will strengthen commercial relations by streamlining customs and border procedures, as well as cover regulatory practices and small businesses. According to the U.S. Trade Representative, the agreement is intended to strengthen and deepen the economic and trade relationship. In fact, it's the largest trade deal agreement in over 40 years since the diplomatic relations were severed in 1979. Taiwan sees it as a significant opportunity to gradually expand the agreement and develop it into a broader and more comprehensive free trade agreement. Meanwhile, China strongly opposes it, arguing that it violates the One China principle.
China firmly deplores any form of official exchanges between countries that have diplomatic relations with the Taiwan province of China, including the negotiation and signing of any agreements with sovereign implications and official nature.
Beijing has also called for the withdrawal of the agreement, warning that the consequences resulting from the trade deal would be solely the responsibility of the U.S. Shin-Young, Arirang News.
Next Monday, June 5th, is the 50th World Environment Day. It's a day designated by the United Nations to celebrate environmental action and rally governments, businesses, and individuals to step up and protect planet Earth. In light of this occasion, our culture correspondent Song Yoo-jin helps us explore growing popularity of pet plants here in the country.
It's a leafy twist to the concept of pets. More people in South Korea are embracing plants as a member of the family. Recent data shows a rise in pot plant sales, with 139 million sold in 2021, up by 5 million from the year before. This trend took root after the outbreak of COVID-19.
Having a pet reduces loneliness, boosts self-esteem, and creates a strong bond. With COVID-19 keeping us at home, people turn to indoor activities like raising plants. Research shows pet plants improve emotional and physical health, such as stabilizing heart rate and reducing depression.
While adopting a pet is one thing, providing proper care is another story. Plants cannot communicate their needs by wagging their tails or purring. This is where institutions like pet plant hospitals come in handy.
So right now I'm at a pet plant hospital that's run by Seoul City, and today I have two pet plants with me, my pet cactus and this Kalanchoe Kalancho, to have their health checkups for the very first time.
All you need to do is make an online reservation and visit the hospital. Mr. Ju Jae-chun is the hospital's director.
이 친구는 가급적 해가 많이 비치는 데 봐주는 게 좋은 식물이에요. 선인장은 주로 햇볕 쨍쨍한 데 키우잖아요. 그렇게. 그러니까 식물을 가꿀 때 그 식물이 원래 살던 환경을 만들어주는 게 가장 좋아요.
Plants requiring special care are admitted to the hospital and are housed in this final ward. But it's not just medical services that the hospital offers.
Besides professional treatment, the doctor also told me what I should be mindful of when raising a plant.
Director Chu hopes the hospital can serve a meaningful purpose.
When I explain to owners what made their plants sick, I can sense that they want to understand and rectify the situation so they don't repeat the same mistakes. We opened this hospital to help owners nurture their plants and provide the best care.
For those unable to bring their plants to the hospital, virtual consultations, phone calls, and in-person visits are also available, all free of charge. Song Yoo-jin, Arirang News.
For this weekend, daytime heat will continue to dominate across South Korea. Most regions, including Seoul, will see temperatures exceeding the seasonal average. For both Saturday and Sunday, highs will be topping out at 28 degrees in Seoul. Strong UV rays are expected for tomorrow, so make sure to wear plenty of sunblock. And we'll have no concerns about fine dust this weekend as the air is circulating at a fairly fast rate. Air quality will be standing in the normal to good category nationwide. For those across the coastlines of the south, please use extra caution around the waters. Gusty offshore winds and high waves are in the forecast, creating dangerous ocean conditions. Tomorrow, Seoul and Busan will be starting off at 18 degrees. Expect wide temperature gaps with highs jumping significantly. Seoul will get up to 28 degrees, Daejeon and Gwangju 27, Daegu will reach 29 degrees. And more cloud coverage will be seen next week. Have a great weekend, and here are the weather conditions around the world.
That's all for this Friday night newscast. Thank you for watching. Hope everyone has a great weekend and a good night.
global leader of eco-friendly future materials. Green tomorrow with POSCO.